Tonight, we're discussing end-time preparedness, a subject we've been asked about many times over the past year. Rather than trying to cover every aspect of this topic in a single video, we wanted to begin with a broad overview. We'll look at principles from Scripture and the spirit of prophecy, share some practical thoughts, and talk about a few of the lessons we've learned through our own experiences. We certainly don't claim to be experts on this subject, and we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. If you've discovered approaches that worked well for your family or lessons you've learned along the way, we'd love to hear them. Most importantly, we want to be very clear about one thing. We are not preppers, and we do not believe that any amount of physical preparation or any possession can ultimately save us. Whether you have abundant resources to make extensive preparations or very little ability to prepare, the only true preparation for what lies ahead is our living personal relationship with Jesus Christ. Everything else is secondary. And really quickly, before we begin, I wanted to share a brief ministry update. Back in January, you may remember that we turned off monetization here on our YouTube channel. If you happen to see an advertisement on one of our videos, we didn't place it there. YouTube may have, but we receive exactly $0 from YouTube for any of our content. We also don't do sponsored content. Everything we do is made possible directly through the generosity of those who choose to support this ministry. Whether it's producing our weekly videos, expanding into new projects like our recent Washington, D.C. documentary, or investing in future resources that we believe will further this work, it's all possible because of faithful donors who believe in what we're doing. To every one of you who has prayed for us, shared our videos, or supported this ministry financially, thank you. We truly couldn't do this without you. We're constantly dreaming and planning for what comes next, and we're incredibly excited about what the Lord is doing. At the beginning of the year, we told you our goal was to hire an additional part-time video editor. By God's grace, we've had 2 part-time editors helping for the past 6 months, and as of next week, one of those editors will officially be our first full-time employee. Every dollar that's given goes directly towards expanding this work, ministry expenses, and increasing our ability to produce Christ-centered, historically grounded, biblically faithful content. If you found value in these videos and would like to partner with us, I'll leave our donation information on the screen. Whether through your prayers, sharing these videos with others, or supporting us financially, we're deeply grateful for your partnership in this ministry. With that said, let's get started. Welcome back to Heritage and Hope Ministries. I'm your host, Alex, and I'm also joined by Dr. Brian Husted, and also my brother, James. And then also we have a guest, Andrew Bakitschke from Sanctuary Door Ministry. Andrew, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you for having me.
And the Matthew Shanche Show.
That's right. Yeah, you co-host the Truth Project.
Yes,
yeah.
It's Matthew Shanche, yes.
Very, very good, very good. Well, today I figured we would do something a little different. So this is going to be an end times preparedness presentation. I wanted to start with just a few Ellen White quotes, and then we're going to get into some pictures, and we're going to be talking about everything from solar to water sources to country property to everything in between. So
awesome.
Let's go ahead and jump into it. One of the first quotes that kind of struck me that is written here in letters and manuscripts, she says, "We are living amid the perils of the last days. The wrath of God is preparing to come upon all the cities, not all at once, but one after another. And if the terrible punishment in one city does not cause the inhabitants of other cities to be afraid and seek repentance, their time will come. When the Lord riseth to shake terribly the earth, he will not cease until his work in punishment is done. The destruction will begin in certain places, and the destruction of life will be sudden, and but few will escape. There is not to be given an encouraging thought that the gospel of Jesus Christ will be accepted by the large majority of men prior to his coming again, the second time with power and great glory. I am instructed by revelation to say that most solemn and overwhelming judgments are determined upon all people who have the light before them in the word of God, but who do not follow it." Mm-hmm. So what does this quote make you think of?
Well, the first thing that really stands out to me is the one where it says right here in the middle, "There is not to be given an encouraging thought that the gospel of Jesus Christ will be accepted by the large majority of men prior to his coming again, the second time with power and great glory." Sometimes we are very obsessed with somehow trying to make our message more palatable than it, you know, by modifying it and trying to make it seem like we can get more people this way. But we're told that most people are not going to accept that truth, and we have to stick to the truth.
And the last thing we want to do is dilute the message at
Right.
all to get more people to accept it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what I think of is the days of Noah. So like very few escape.
Yeah.
8.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah,
Eight.
exactly.
What was the population of the earth at that time?
Probably billions.
Billions and billions, yeah.
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 If it's
Yeah.
like Sodom too, if we know judgments are coming, get out and do not look back.
Yeah, exactly.
Get out now.
You know what struck me is the thought that, the Christian nationalist movement, it basically posits that they're basically going to Christianify the entire world. And
Starting
that,
in the cities.
and that, yeah. And it's like the kind of inverse is really true long term.
Yeah.
But we have other quotes here by her as well. And like I said, I just have a few of these, but I thought these would be interesting to kind of set the stage before we jump into the preparedness aspect. She says, I am trying to get our brethren to get out of the cities on a piece of land and be, what's that next word right there? Prepared to raise their own produce. This they will have to do. Is that imperative right there?
Mm-hmm.
The Sunday laws have been passed, and just as stringent as a people ignorant of the laws of God can make them, we must be prepared for some emergencies.
And any emergency.
Any emergency. The churches are making history fast. We must be more oft at the footstool of mercy, pleading with God, walk humbly with God, but do not manifest a craven spirit, but a spirit of dependence upon God as one who believes and trusts in God. The Lord is our trust and the crown of our rejoicing. Walk in the way of the Lord, and you will walk securely. I must close, for my head will not work. Okay, so this is letters and manuscripts as well. Now, what strikes you about this quote?
I think the quotes we often hear hammered over and over and over again is we're to make no preparation for and I think the context is a great time of trouble when you read those quotes. But this quote here is a very clear balancing one for the little time of trouble when we start to see these initially taking place. And honestly, I hadn't seen it to this degree before myself. This they will have to do. Or be prepared to raise their own produce. I mean, these are very, very clear
Emphatic.
statements right here.
Yeah.
That I mean, this is really critical.
Yeah.
If we want to eat,
Right.
we have to be able to grow food.
So, the main thing that we are given counsel on, though, is gardening. One of the main things that you need with a garden is you need a way to keep certain pests out. And so that means fencing it. And the reason why is because these are some critters that have been on my property, and these are public enemy number one.
Yeah. They know you're vegetarian.
They know I'm vegetarian.
And so are
Take
they.
advantage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so are they.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. The other thing is, do you have ways of starting seeds, or are we just going to be buying plants from Ace Hardware and Home Depot forever? I mean, do we have ways of starting stuff? And that involves typically little starters like this. You can actually make your own. You don't have to buy the pre-bought store ones. And then it helps if you have some grow lights and some heating mats. If you're trying to start a garden, if you're just planting it in the soil, you may run into a bad time depending on where you are. It helps if you can do some soil amendments and get the garden really going well. And so if you go to a bulk place like this, they'll sell black gold, and it has soil conditioner, mushroom compost, sand and leaf compost. And so this is a picture of
That stuff works.
this is a picture of my trailer right here loaded down.
I've used that stuff in Canada, and it's great.
Yeah.
It's wonderful.
Yeah. And but don't buy the bags. If you're
No,
just buying
no.
bags of
Buy it
stuff,
in bulk.
buy it in
Yep.
bulk like this.
Far more efficient and
Yeah.
better, yeah.
Now, one of the things that I really appreciated, and James has helped me with this significantly, is putting in a proper irrigation system. And so using something like Rainbird has a whole host of different products out there, and they actually have a supplier near us where we can go in person to their store.
The thing I loved about the irrigation setup that we had is we had a controller that would hook up to the local Wi-Fi, so you could basically water the garden from anywhere.
Yeah, it's
long
like
as you
app
had
controlled.
as long as you had an
Yeah.
internet control, you could just take out your phone and turn it on, turn it off.
Right. The other thing you have to consider is, are you going to be going toxic or are you going to be going organic? So you will see products that you can use for pests and pests that really are considered organic gardening. So copper fungicide, neem oil, and garlic barrier there. And so if you plant those are going to be more bee friendly. And they're not going to be as toxic. Now, where this becomes particularly apparent, and where I really don't like the toxic stuff, and I much prefer, and I've really tried to go the organic route, is when you have bees. So we have bees, and
And that's not an AI image. That's you.
no,
doing
yeah,
this.
that's me with the bees.
Yeah.
So we have bees, and we've been able to harvest the honey from it. And man, we've had some crazy bee stories. You keep bees, and man, you are always entertained. There's always something going on. There's a picture of our marked queen. We bought a marked queen with a set, and you see the little blue dot there on her back. But okay, so we have these beehives set up, and I'm at work, and I'm down at the hospital, and like I'm stuck there. I can't leave. Right, I'm right in the middle of my shift. And my wife starts texting and calling me, and she's like, "You will not believe what's going on in the backyard." And she starts calling. James, you were here when this happened, so you could probably tell the story better than I can. But basically, I had my hives, these 2 hives set up, and we had a rogue swarm that came in, and you see them there. That is a solid cluster of bees on the right, and that's a picture of what was happening. So this solid cluster of rogue bees was trying to take over the hive and rob the hive.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife, she said that it was like aerial combat, like kamikaze dive bombing. It was like a tornado cyclone of bees. The whole ground, like for like 30 feet, like buzzing and humming with like this activity, and dead bees just littering the ground from like this aerial combat. And so I remember being on FaceTime with my wife, and James is out back with a stepladder trying to reach up and cut the branch off because we were trying to save this colony, because we were like, man, we can capture it and put it in our own hive. And so James is up there with like a tree trimmer trying to trim the tree branch down and shake these bees off. Meanwhile, like bees are going nuts all around you. It was wild.
Yeah, it was quite the adventure.
So most recently, we've had a colony that we were given, actually, that we set up, and it split, and now we have 2 from it. Andrew, you tried some of the honey the other day. What did you think of it?
It was really good. Yeah, it was very good honey. Yeah.
So if you have bees, though, you can see an increase in your garden by up to 15 to 70%. And I can testify to this because I had fruit trees in my backyard. And we had a garden, and when our bees were at peak performance, like a few years back, when we had them, we have some now, but we really had them back a few years ago. We had the tree branches where the fruit was so heavy the branches were snapping. I mean, it was just laden with fruit. And so bees really can increase your garden yield, and then you get honey out of it as well. The other thing that you can do is hydroponics. You can actually grow indoors. So this is something that everybody can do year-round, and it's actually really kind of fascinating how you do it. You can take a piece of plastic gutter, which is what that is. You can cut the end of it and kind of fold it in on itself, and so you make this basically trough that's about that deep. And then you can take a pool noodle, and you can put a start inside that pool noodle.
Isn't this called the Krupke method or Krupke or something?
I'm not sure the naming on it. Yeah. But you can put a pool noodle around the start and then put it in this where the roots are just barely dangling into the water. And then you can put a light source over the top of it, which they make different kinds of lights. You want to make sure that you get one that's full spectrum, that's providing all the different photon wavelengths that you need. But you can grow stuff indoors, and man, it'll jump out of the start. I mean, it grows very, very rapidly, and you can end up with some really good greens. So this is a way to get greens year round, even in winter. And you can end up with some really vibrant looking stuff. You can also do it with 5-gallon bucket, and you can grow tomatoes that way, where you cover it with aluminum foil, and you'll have a start kind of growing out of the side. And it's amazing what you can grow in this. It's really phenomenal. And I wish Michael was here. He could tell more about this, because he was the expert that kind of put some of this together. So this leads to satisfaction. You know, where were we originally designed to live?
In a garden.
In a garden.
Yeah. So
and eat the garden too, and eat of the garden.
Yeah.
Exactly. So this is a plate right here of a salad that I made with lettuce from our garden, carrots from our garden, onion from our garden, dressing, which was lemon, poppy seed, and honey, with honey from our apiary, and croutons from bread that I baked from wheat that I ground. So when I ate that plate, it may look like a very simple salad, kind of a boring salad, but man, there's a lot of satisfaction in it.
I think it looks really good, honestly.
And so these are just some pictures. We have chestnut trees on our property, and so the chestnuts can provide a protein source. You know, the deer love those things. They'll be out there eating them all the time. But the chestnuts provide a protein source, and then we have just had a real big blessing. These are some of the onions that we've harvested from our garden before. Just a lot of different things that we've been able to grow. And there's our pear trees. We had some really big fig plants on our property. We've transplanted those elsewhere on our property, but we had some really big fig producers.
Figs are great.
Yeah. And you can dry those too, and they're really good.
Mm-hmm.
But if you really want to get into gardening to a large degree, you really need to be able to plant year-round. This greenhouse is a large tunnel greenhouse. And inside, they put raised beds, and they had this done really clean. And you actually have like very specific places where they're planting stuff. They've got fans up at the top to make sure that there's plenty of air going through there. Now, some people out there are going to say, well, yeah, that's like a $30,000 or $40,000 greenhouse. I don't have $30,000 or $40,000. But the truth of the matter is that you don't actually need a whole lot of money to build a greenhouse. Here's one that somebody took, and they took some 2x12s or 2x10s, and they 2x4s, some screws, and then they took cattle panels right there. Well, those cattle panels are really cheap, actually. And then you can cover it with plastic around the outside, and you can still get a pretty good temperature differential. Now, you're not going to be 100% year-round unless you put a heat source in there, but you're going to be able to grow a whole lot longer than you normally would. But then you can take the plastic off at times, and so that is an option. If you know that it's warm enough, then you just take the cover off and you can have it grow the rest of the season that way. So there's ways of doing it. You can also do it with PVC. These people did it with PVC. You can bend the PVC up over the top and down the other side, and you can have shade cloth. You can have plastic, and so you can insulate your greenhouse that way. So that's kind of a broad overview of gardening, but there's much more that could be said about gardening. I mean, this is a very expansive topic that could go on and on for a very long time.
We're not saying go buy a bunch of Little Links and Big Franks and stockpile them and bury them in your yard. This is not that at all.
Right.
But the argument is basically, we don't need to prepare because God's going to take care of us, but we have counsel to prepare.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not to say that God will not take care of us, just like he did Elijah with the ravens, because he certainly will. Mm-hmm. But right now in this moment, while we have the capability to, we are to prepare and get ready.
So I have an interesting analogy to throw. Okay. Noah, okay. Mm-hmm. He was preparing for 120 years for a calamity that he could not get through. And even if he had built that boat on his own without God, he would not have made it through that flood. We are told that there were angels that were by that boat specifically protecting it, because even the boat, as good as it was built, was not enough.
Well, Spirit of Prophecy says Lucifer feared for his own life. It was so bad.
He was trembling because of the judgments of God. But, I will show you my faith by my works. That means that being prepared for end times living and like getting out in the country is actually a manifestation of faith.
Absolutely. Well, going back to growing food and produce, the Lord brings the increase.
Yeah.
But we have a part to play too.
Right.
And the same thing with the harvest on the earth as well.
Proverbs 27, verse 12, a prudent man foreseeth the evil and hideth himself, but the simple pass on and are punished.
Now, I want to be balanced with this, because you just referenced something. You said that during the great time of trouble, we're not going to be prepared for that. That's going to be ravens feeding us, manna falling from the sky. And so we have to understand that there's two ditches here that you can fall into. You can go full prepper and, have 20 years of food stockpiled. And you can also say, I'll just live in the city. I don't need to prepare. God's got me. And neither position is in accordance with counsel.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So you might have this quote already, but there's a broadside, January 31st, 1849. For 2 years, the Lord has shown me in vision repeatedly that it is contrary to the Bible to make any provision for our temporal wants in the time of trouble. I saw that if saints had food laid up by them or in the fields in the time of trouble, when sword, famine, and pestilence are in the land, it will be taken from them by violent hands, and strangers would reap their fields. Now here, she's obviously speaking about raising their own produce. So we are to have produce in our fields for the little time of trouble.
Yes.
Kind of building up to this time period. But the context here, because it's obviously this counsel is directly opposed to that, is a different time during the great time of trouble when the plagues are being poured out.
And the words in there, the words sword, what is it? Sword, pestilence, and
famine and pestilence.
Where do you see those words in the scriptures? Because she's paraphrasing the scriptures, right?
Yeah.
You see that that's with Thyatira. That's the time. That's Thyatira. That's the 1,260 years. That is the time of the papal supremacy. So when she's talking about the great time of trouble.
Wow.
So, okay, now we also have some other quotes by her. Let's look at this one. Men are inspired by Satan to execute his purposes against God. The Lord has said, "Verily my Sabbaths ye shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations. None should disobey this command in order to escape persecution, but let all consider the words of Christ. When they persecute you in this city, flee into another. If it can be avoided, do not put yourselves into the power of men who are worked by the spirit of Antichrist. If the payment of a fine will deliver our brethren from the hands of these oppressors, let it be paid. Everything that we can do should be done, that those who are willing to suffer for the truth's sake may be saved from oppression and cruelty." Here is Atlanta. Let me zoom in a little bit. Do you notice anything in particular about Atlanta that is interesting?
Well, there's a lot of major roads there.
285 is the ring road that goes around Atlanta, and the heart of Atlanta is right in the center. One thing that I think is really important and is this next quote by Ellen White. She says here, "Ere long there will be such strife and confusion in the cities that those who wish to leave them will not be able." Okay. So if you think about this, if you live in a city like Atlanta and you're inside that ring road right there, where all that is, if you were trying to lock it down, let's say that you were having, proper strife.
Yeah. My testimony of kind of coming back, to the faith was the early step. I didn't even realize I was taking it, but I left Los Angeles just because I thought, you know what, things when they're going to go bad, they're going to go really bad.
Yeah.
And I think that applies to all the cities. And I think it's the same idea. You will not be able to get out. So if they wanted to lock down the city, I think that's where you're getting at, is that that's a great way to set up a perimeter where they would not let you out,
Yeah, every overpass, every
Martial
bridge.
law.
Martial law. Where then would you buy property? Well, this is, I live in Tennessee, so we're just going to use Tennessee as an example, but other states have something similar to this. You can go on Tennessee and they have the Tennessee Plat Map Viewer, and you can click on different counties and you can zoom in and you can actually see the property lines of individual property. I think one thing that is worthwhile is looking at those lot lines and seeing how much country do you have around you. So if you're looking for country property, if you're like, you know what, I want to buy 5 acres in the country, don't just look at it blindly. Look at it and see, what does it back up to?
So you're saying we're going to Willis Springs?
Well, the reason I included this particular one is this is actually my personal dream is a piece of property like this, because you see Willis Springs right there. There's one rectangle that's surrounded on 3 sides by nothing. Now, do you know what that nothing is?
National Forest?
That's the Cherokee National Forest. So that is 170,000 acres, or I don't even know how many acres it is, of government land that is never going to be developed, ever. There's a lot of benefit in having your back up against something that has nothing.
I think the point you're making is put a lot of thought.
Yes.
And fasting and prayer, but, be conscientious about that.
Right. You can also go on Google Earth and you can click 3D. And it'll show you an interactive topographic, and so you can see how hilly the property is. Because if you're trying to do a garden, you don't want something that's very hilly. You don't want to have something that you're having to terrace it incredibly, or like, you're on such a steep hillside that there's no way you could ever use the land, because a lot of land is like that. You think that you're buying 5 acres in the country, but what you're really buying is about half an acre that's in the country, and the rest is a straight hillside.
Yeah. I think it's important to say, too, you can turn, with the Tennessee Property Viewer, you can turn on the flood zones.
Oh,
And it shows it very well.
That's a very important thing to do.
Yeah.
Because you'll
Especially
find
this
out why
area.
some properties are really cheap.
Yeah,
exactly.
It's because they're in
all
the flood zones. Yeah. And also, too, what about, because you're thinking about growing seasons, right?
Yeah.
As well, because you got to raise your own produce. So what about, is there sort of an idea about the elevation based on latitude as far as
certainly. And the other thing is you need to know what zone you're in for planting. Because the zones are going to change and what you can grow in each zone. Now, there's some things that like you want to grow and they're like right on the border of whether or not you should grow. So, for example, I have a pear tree. I have multiple pear trees on my property. And one of the pear trees, it's like right on the border of the zone. Now, it's a big, healthy tree, but I only get fruit from it about every other or maybe every 3rd year, because I'll have a frost that comes through just at the tail end of winter, and it'll kill all the blossoms. Now, sometimes it doesn't happen and the blossoms make it through and I get a bumper crop of pears, but the rest of the time I don't. Now, there's things you can try and mitigate that, but do you really want to go out there and be trying to tarp them and put heaters underneath your trees and stuff? Like, nobody wants to do that. So you need to know what zone you're in for planting. The other thing that I think is very pertinent here is there's many people, I think, that have this notion that when we're living through the end times, we're going to be just huddled up somewhere. It's like, well, I'm just going to bug in and I've got my property in the back 40 and I'm just going to sit there and hunker down and wait for it to all blow over. Maybe I'll even build a bunker out there, But that's actually not what she says. She says, when they persecute you in this city, flee into another. And so there's this concept of continual movement. Okay. So don't let people be lulled into the sense of thinking like, well, I'll just stay right here and, I'll just, ride it out.
What about the vision in early writings where they're on their way to the heavenly Canaan? They load up their wagons, they load up all their things, and as they go, they have to slowly get rid of more and more things. On the journey there, I think there's also something about lightening our load and being not too attached to our things and being able to move and travel. And,
very much so.
Yeah,
I agree. Okay. There's another quote here. And like I said, I just have a few of these, but these are really pertinent. The time is short, and what is before us is impossible to tell. We know what is before us, but when will that be? It cometh, Christ said, suddenly, and the He gives them warning. When certain things should take place, don't go into your house to get anything out of it. Make your way to the mountains as fast as you can. Well, what may break forth upon us we know not. But one thing we know, we should be ready. Humble yourselves day by day, and then seek to impart to others the very light that God gives you.
this sounds like the great time of trouble if you're fleeing to the mountains.
Right.
Right.
Because it says don't go back into the house,
The
basically.
house, yeah. And it's going to be a lot easier to flee to the mountains if you're already in your country property versus then your apartment building downtown.
And I think that, you know, we're sort of doing this a little bit out of order. I think we had discussed it in a previous episode, but we were wanting to do a sequence of end time events on this channel where we go through each part in absolute meticulous minutia. And so we're still planning on doing that. If that interests you, drop a comment down below and let us know to help give us encouragement.
Oh, there's people that are interested in that.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. No, there's some. Yeah, some people obsess about that, actually.
Yeah, but we should have a clear understanding.
We should
of what's coming.
understand things, yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't take the place of actually spiritually being ready.
Oh, of course. That's the most important.
I think it's important too, you know, it's not just about being, if we are not walking with God daily, we are not going to be prepared when these, either the little time of trouble or, you know, the later time of trouble comes.
Right.
It's about character development. And what was God's original plan? He made a garden.
Right.
And he walked with Adam and Eve in the garden. We go over and over. Enoch walked with God. Where is he walking with God? He was likely out in the country, right?
Yep.
And so it's about our relationship with God and character development to get ready for those time of trouble. Because if you're not ready, it doesn't matter what your garden looks like. If you don't have that personal relationship with him where you're totally reliant on him.
100%.
And I think, you know, the connection with character development in the country is as well, because that is, that is actually the point, you know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Enoch,
exactly.
like Enoch.
And getting away from the corruption. And for those who have kids, getting our kids away from all the corruption in the cities as well.
Yeah.
Okay. I had another quote here. I was called out to urge our people to seek the Lord most earnestly. Last night, I was passing through scenes of great and fearful interest. I was called from my sleep to arouse. The words came, "The Lord Jesus cares for you and his people." Outside the building, there was a large multitude, and this angel had aroused the believers in the house and was telling them, "Haste ye to the mountains. I have prepared a path for you." The word was, "You have no time to lose." A door was opened in a cellar, and there was a passage to go out underground and leading out to the mountains. I cannot give any description of the matter, for I was surprised. But the messenger was an angel of God, and this scene was acted before me as a scene of living reality. And words were spoken, "The churches are asleep." I can remember no more, but I could not sleep after that, for it was 12 o'clock, and I dressed and have been writing and searching for the message the Lord has heretofore given me. It is night now. What a day I have had of intensity of consideration. What do you guys think?
We're not ready. And
We're not
God
ready.
really wants us to realize that we're not ready. And just like the disciples in the Garden of Gethsemane,
Right.
we're going to be awakened suddenly. And and it's like, how did we go to sleep? It's like the 10 virgins. You know, they're not knowing when it's coming,
Right.
but are they going to be ready?
I love the fact that God has 1,000 ways to rescue his people when that time comes.
Right.
And, you know, I think sometimes people get depressed or discouraged that, wait, I don't have the funds, I don't have the means to move out onto 20 acres in the country and have a giant garden, I don't have the physical capacity, whatever your limitation is. I think that the beauty of this is if we are doing all that is within our power today,
Yes.
God has set before us today, and walking in His will. If you have small means, maybe getting prepared, even if it means a small garden in the back of what you have currently. You may not have hardly anything, but if you're doing what you can today, the Lord will bless tomorrow, and He is the one that will work a miracle when the time comes.
Yeah, I think it's important that everybody makes a move in that direction based on their prayer life.
Yes.
And based on God's leading.
Think of it as like the talents. Some of us may not have 10 talents or 10 acres, if you will. We might only have one, but if we're taking that one talent and we're burying it in the ground saying, I don't have enough land to do anything, so like I'm not going to just do anything, then we're like that guy who had only one talent and buried it.
Well, like we were just saying about the book of James, though, show me faith by my works, right? If we use that concept, it doesn't really matter how much means you have then, because if you're doing whatever you can to try and get ready, it is an out showing of faith. And that's the whole point. It's not that the things are actually going to save you.
Right.
It's just that we're told, we have counsel, we're told what to do, we should be moving towards it. Whether we have a lot of means or a little means, we should be moving towards it in faith.
Yeah.
Because that's what it's all about. It's righteousness by faith at the end of the day.
How long ago were we supposed to follow this counsel?
Yeah, well, that's actually, I have a quote here, and I don't know, you may already have this one, Alex, but it's from Last Day Events, chapter 7. It says, out of the cities is my message at this time. Be assured that the call is for a people to locate miles away from the large cities. One look at San Francisco as it is today would speak to your intelligent mind, showing you the necessity of getting out of the cities. This was her time.
Well, you can say that about San Francisco today.
Well, yeah. Imagine if she saw it today,
Okay, so now it's time to go into story time. Okay, I got a story here to tell you. So back in 2020, the pandemic is in full swing. It's March, April, around that time. And we had, down here in southern Tennessee, we had a very, very bad storm that came through. And that storm brought tornadoes. And the tornadoes that touched down were absolutely horrific. And I was sitting in my house and with my newborn son, and we had skylights. And through the skylights, I could see like this continual lightning flash. It was the strangest thing, like just continuous lightning. Really, really intense storm. Didn't touch our house, didn't touch our property. But I knew that, the power went off, and I knew that it had caused a lot of damage. And I was listening, on the radio and looking at news clips and watching meteorologists and everything. And I was realizing, wow, this is really bad. There's like, tornado warnings all over the place. Like, this is a big deal. So the next morning, I got in my truck, and I had a chainsaw, a good chainsaw. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to go out and see where all the damage is and just see what happens. So I left my wife at home, and I got in my truck, and I drove down about 20 minutes away. And I found that there had been absolute decimation. Houses wiped off the ground, trees down, power lines down, just everywhere, all over the place. And we got to this road, and I pulled into the middle of a roundabout. And there was area there so I could park my truck. And I got out, and there was this giant tree across the road that was probably, 2.5, 3 feet around. Big, big tree. And so I was like, well, you know what? I'm just going to cut it. I just feel like cutting it. So I sat there, and I fired up my chainsaw, and I started cutting through this tree. And pretty soon, this county backhoe comes up behind me, and he's trying to clear the roads. Now, he's a decent-sized backhoe, but this tree was no match for him. I mean, his backhoe was no match for this tree, I should say. This massive tree. And so he's like, well, I can't push it out of the way, but if you cut it, I'll push it out of the way. And I was like, okay. And, he's a county worker. Like, he's there to clear the roads. I was like, sure, why not? And so I start cutting this tree, and we pushed that out of the way. And then I was like, well, I'll just keep walking, and I'll cut anything that's too big for you to push. And he was like, okay. And so, I've never met this person before in my life, but we start walking down the middle of the road on the yellow line, right down the middle of the road. And I would cut stuff, and he would push it out of the way. Well, I'm going along, and all of a sudden the fire department comes up behind us, and they're walking along. They're checking on houses as we go. And then pretty soon, SWAT comes up, the police, and they're on quads, ATVs, and they're riding behind me, and I am the only one there with a chainsaw. None of them had a chainsaw. The fire department didn't have one. The police didn't have
The fire
one.
department didn't have a chainsaw.
They did not have a chainsaw.
At least not with them.
Not with him. Not with him. And so we're walking along, and this tree had fallen and entrapped people in their house. And so, I'm walking along and I'm cutting stuff. And one of the fire department members comes up to me and he's like, "Hey, can I borrow your chainsaw? Those people are trapped in their house." And I was like, "Sure." And so he takes my chainsaw and he goes over and he's cutting these people out of their house that they're trapped in. And that's when, back in 2020, it all kind of was like, this is kind of surreal, right? Like we've got the pandemic going on. The world has been thrown into abject chaos. And now I'm seeing like my local community absolutely torn apart. I mean, and then, I'm working at the hospital too, a trauma hospital. And I hear accounts of these tornado victims that came in, they got thrown like 150 feet, and thrown through glass windows and just like, all their family members killed and them maimed beyond belief. And they're sitting there like in the trauma ICU recovering from it. And I'm realizing just how fast life can be turned upside down.
This is preparing you to get ready personally.
Yeah. And so what you see here on the screen actually is pictures that day. And that's Aaron, who's been on this podcast before. And he's out there with his boots. And that's my chainsaw that he's holding right there. And we were going through trying to help clear stuff. And here's other pictures. They had these giant, this wasn't one of the county backhoes. This is one of those big front loaders that they had out there also trying to clear stuff. And I mean, you had stuff that was just all over the road, covered in power lines. And the houses just looked absolutely horrific. And so we know that preparation isn't just about saving ourselves. And that's one thing I really want to highlight is that a lot of times people think that like end times preparedness, it's about like, well, I got to get ready. It's like, yeah, but you also are getting ready so that you can be a blessing to others because you know what?
Amen.
When those times come and we see natural disaster increasing significantly, people are never more receptive when they're at their lowest.
Yep, absolutely.
And if you can be a blessing and then be like, hey, I brought you some bread because I know you don't have any food because it all just got erased. And I also have a book for you to read.
Yeah.
Right.
That's going to go far more than you just going up and knocking on their door any other time of the day.
Yeah. I think it's an important point to make what you're making is that we're not saying get out of the cities and go hide in the country.
Right.
We're supposed to live in the country as outposts to go work into the cities and witness.
Yes, exactly. And I think medical missionary works in this way as well.
Oh yeah.
That you're
100%.
preparing these things not just for your own health, but you're there to help other people.
Right.
When those times hit.
So Ellen White quote here, she says, again and again, the Lord has instructed that our people are to take their families away from the cities into the country where they can raise their own provisions. And again, talking about buying and selling being a very serious one. Now, look at the bottom of that quote. It says, get out of the cities into rural districts where the houses are not crowded closely together and where you will be free from the interference of enemies. So if your neighborhood looks like this,
Yep.
and you were looking, I'm speaking straight to our listener at this point. If you're looking for a sign that's like,
This
get
is
out.
it.
Here's your
Okay.
sign.
Here's your sign. It's time to get out.
Yeah.
Okay.
And all the new neighborhoods look like this.
Oh, they
because they're
do,
trying to
Yeah.
maximize profit.
More and more.
Yeah,
they do,
so,
yeah.
yeah.
What is the instruction from Ellen White? She says, get out of the cities as soon as possible and purchase a little piece of land where you can have a garden, where your children can watch the flowers growing and learn from them lessons of simplicity and purity. I submit to you that this is really kind of what we need to be trying to get towards is proper country living. And then ultimately you want something that you can have a house on, you can have a garden space. Now this is an AI generated image right here. But you want to have your property kind of divided up into different areas for different use. And preferably, there's this whole concept of basically not being obtrusive. I've heard some other people call it like gray man philosophy.
Yeah, gray man.
And gray man basically means it's not that you're dressing in gray or anything. It's basically that you want to be the most vanilla, boring person to eyesight that you can. So like you're not the one that's driving the red sports car. You're driving the old beat up F-150 that's painted white just like every other million F-150s on the road, right? You don't want to have the property that has, the elegant arch out front with the lions and the waterfall and the fountains, just telling and telegraphing to everybody that you have a ton of money. No, you want like the well-maintained gravel road that just leads off into nowhere.
And beyond that too, I mean, we're called to a simple, plain life.
Yeah, of course.
And part of that
Yeah.
is it's easy to fall in love with that red sports car.
Oh, of course.
Or the
know?
arches,
Just love it.
or the water fountains.
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly.
So the other thing I think of when we talk about end times living and really just general preparedness is there's this concept of 2 is 1 and 1 is none. You think about a ladder. You're supposed to maintain 3 points of contact while ascending or descending. And it's not because 2 points won't hold you. Obviously, 2 points can hold you. But what happens when one of them fails? If you have 3 points, well, then you still have 2 points and you're good. But if you only have 2 points and one of them fails, then you start falling. So you have to think about diversifying your points of contact so that you can survive basic things that are going on. This is just practical living. This isn't necessarily end times living. This is just practical living.
And then the resources too, like that, you may have that gas stove that works, the power goes out, you still have some form of heat, but eventually that gas is going to run out or get cut off.
Oh, exactly.
So
So
what
what
about
do
like
you
a
do then?
wood burning stove where
Exactly.
you have more
Yeah.
resources?
Or even a
Yeah.
propane where you can actually have your own supply without getting cut off from a line
Right.
as well.
Yeah. So one of the most important things that I'd like to talk about is water. Water is one of the most important things to think about when you're dealing with property. And there's multiple different sources that you can talk about: well water, spring water, rainwater, streams, hand pumps. And so it's important to understand where you're getting your water source. Here is a water meter on the left. And this is, they've been going through here in Tennessee and they've been installing these water meters. And it's an electronic smart sensor. And it actually, you see that little cord cable that's coming off of it? That's actually, they drilled a hole through the manhole cover and they put a little puck there. And I think it uses like a cell tower or it's probably not satellite, but it's probably like a cell tower. And they have a little antenna that goes up to that manhole cover. And so they're monitoring your water usage constantly.
And like you can also, is there a valve there as well to turn it on and off?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So that's
And so they immediately know if you're using water or not. So when you're using county water, you're reliant on somebody else. What happens when a no-buy, no-sell goes into effect?
Yeah.
Are you going to be able to use that? No, you're not. They're going to come shut it off.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the other thing is not just like them shutting it off. You can also have water advisories like what you see here for Oregon. And this is just one example. I mean, I think we've all heard of these before where residents are encouraged to boil their water vigorously. So the water that you get from the city, they chlorinate it. So it's actually not as good for plants. And it's also not as good for your health. Although the chlorine is meant to kill the microorganisms that are there. But the water you get from the city, it's not necessarily the best water.
I think it's important to point out too, obviously, you can only live for 3 days without water. You know,
Right.
in a crisis scenario, that's one of the first things people are going to realize that they need to secure.
Right. And I think of Elijah. He was by the brook Cherith, right?
Mm-hmm.
He stayed there all the way until the brook dried up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was
point.
his cue to move on, basically.
Yeah.
So this is a picture of my well right here, one of my wells. I have multiple wells on my property. We were trying to get this. I actually had some well guys come over because this well hadn't been used in a while, and we were basically trying to get it revamped so that I could water my garden with it. And so I had the well guys out there, and we didn't have power strung out to this well because it hadn't been used in a very long time. And so I brought my generator out there, and we were able to hook up the generator to it, and we were able to kick on the well, and you can see it spitting out water there just fine. Now, it's important to note that if you have a well and you're trying to run it off a generator, you need to understand, number one, what size of a pump is in the well and what is the power necessary to start that well pump, because they have generally a high starting current where you really have to have a lot of amps behind it to start it. Then actually once it's running, it actually draws a lot less current, but that initial oomph basically to start the well pump can be quite taxing. So if you're going to get a generator, it's always to go a little bit on the bigger side if you're going to try and power something like this. And you would need something that, at least for this well pump, is 220. Not all well pumps are that, but
And get a good generator, get a reputable brand.
You mean you don't
generator.
like my Predator generator up there?
I don't say that that's not reputable necessarily, but I don't think you can go wrong with a Honda.
It looks like
yeah.
a Lowe's special there.
Honda generators are going to be your best.
Hondas actually are the best. And actually, there was a video I watched on YouTube where they did a vibration test between a Honda and a Predator, actually. And the Honda was by far and away vibrating a whole lot less than the Predator. And so naturally, it's not going to be wearing out as much. And so it's going to last you longer in the end. But you're also going to pay for that as well.
That's true.
Yeah. So this is the well, and these are just a couple pictures of it. I had a pressure tank that we hooked up to it. But I wanted this for my garden, and then we ended up having to build a little well house around it to insulate it and keep it warm in the winter. And for those of you who are watching, don't take me as some mechanic or mechanically inclined or construction inclined person. I'm in the healthcare industry by trade, so this is not something that I do on the regular. But I still love doing it, and I still love getting my hands dirty.
It looks like you like to use a lot of glue too.
Yeah, there's going to be some criticism over the glue because that's probably about the messiest glue job you can get.
But hey, it works, right?
But it works. No, but that's the thing. It's good to learn how to do these things. We need a practical knowledge.
Right.
And now with YouTube, I mean, there's so much out there. There's so many resources that you can use for DIY stuff at home.
Yeah, you really can. And the thing is like, what are you really going to hurt? Like, just go try it.
Yeah.
You can, if you make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. Like,
Right.
Unless it's 220 voltage.
I was going to say, exactly.
Okay, here is another well that I had, and this is a hand pump. And so it didn't have an electric pump in it. I was like, you know what? So I went down to Tractor Supply and I got myself, 30 feet of PVC, and I stuck the PVC pipe down in there with a one-way valve at the bottom. And then I screwed on this hand pump, and I'm able to pump it, and water comes out just perfect. Now, the thing with a hand pump is hand pumps like this one work off of suction. So they suck the water in the bottom of the 30-foot extension, and then you pump it out the top. That works if your water level is not beneath 30 feet. Now, the reason why it doesn't work past 30 feet is if you try and pump it at 40 feet, the suction or the weight of the water is so strong that you can't actually create a suction that's strong enough to pull the water up.
Yeah.
And so suction pumps only work to 30 feet. Now, luckily, this well has water at 10 feet.
Wow.
And so I put my 30-foot stick down there, and I have literally never run this well dry, ever. Wow. Even in the dead of summer when we haven't had rain for 3 weeks, I can pump it. And I've watered my garden with this. It pumps out a good bit of water. I put a 5-gallon bucket underneath it, and I sit there and go up and give each plant a drink, and it works just fine.
Would that be kind of an above average? I mean, as someone who's never had a well, I'm just asking, like, how deep typically?
This is a pretty good well.
Yeah,
this is a pretty good well.
Like it. Yeah.
It depends on the region you're in too.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, the water table's different.
Now, I will say, I do think that is somewhat, the depth limit here is somewhat unique to this particular model, because I am seeing some deep well pumps.
Well, I'm going to get into those. So you're talking about simple pumps and bison pumps.
Yes.
Okay. So simple pumps and bison pumps do not work off of suction. So they actually have a rod that goes down, and the actual cylinder that does the pumping is at the bottom of the well rather than at the top of the well.
Oh.
Okay, so both the simple pump and the bison pump, you can pump water, I think it's as deep as 400 feet.
I'm seeing 300 on the website here, but somewhere around there.
Yeah, 350, I think it varies. But now these cost significantly more than the suction pump. This suction pump, all told, I think I spent probably maybe $60 on PVC and fittings and one-way valve, and then I think I spent another $60 on the actual pump. So I was only in it like maybe $120, $150 at the most. Versus if you look at these bison pumps or simple pumps, you're looking at a significant investor. You're looking at probably $2,500 or more. You can also, if you happen to have a property that's fortunate enough, you can have a spring like this that you can have an electric pump to that can pump water to a house. And so if you have a property with a spring, well, then you've really lucked out, because that's phenomenal. So, James, what is this?
Yeah, this is a Berkey water filter. I've got a buddy of mine who's basically, when he set up his property, he didn't have a well initially, but he did have a creek. And he was using this to basically drink water right out of the creek from. Now, it's not ideal to be doing that full time, but these are kind of well-known, considered to be kind of the gold standard for like water filtration. If you're going to do it, and they've got some really good tall filters.
Because it actually purifies. And that's a specific distinction between filtering and purifying. I don't know if you're going to get into Sawyers and.
I do have a slide on that.
Okay, I won't jump into there yet. But
the one thing that you want to do with these, though, is there's something called a red dye test. So when you get it set up, you want to put a few drops of red dye in the top. And if you're filtering out, if that's coming in through your water, then you got an issue going on. But there's a little bit of trick to setting them up. There are like legitimate, genuine Berkey filters, and there also are a lot of counterfeits out there sold on Amazon for cheap. So if you're buying replacement filters, make sure you're getting like the actual black Berkey legitimate water filters, but they are supposed to be really good.
I actually have one of these. Now I haven't used creek water, but I do have one of these. We were actually just looking to filter out some of the stuff we talked about earlier, like chlorine and fluoride, and I bought this during COVID. Was trying to do some kind of, if I needed it, I could go down to the creek. The problem I've seen now is the filters seem to be out of stock pretty frequently.
Oh, really? Yeah. Well, the good news is if you do get a set of filters, they do last a long time.
They do. Yeah.
But I've seen so many Adventists that have these. I almost had to pose the question, are you even Adventist if you don't have one? And then I realized, like, well, I don't have one, so I guess I don't fit that.
You got to add the Vitamix to that, too.
So. Oh, that's true. If you don't have the Vitamix and the Champion Juicer, what are you doing? So the other option you can get is a reverse osmosis system. I actually have something similar to this, and it does not use electricity. Again, it kind of uses that pressure differential from just the water pressure of the house, and then it puts it into it kind of wastes some of the water, but it'll run it through the filter, and it works really well, actually. And you get some of the absolute best, cleanest water, and it's on tap all the time, and you have 3 gallons of it, so you can't basically run the thing dry because it'll fill it up very quickly. So those are good systems. You can buy these to put underneath your sink for probably
$200 to $300.
Yeah, it's like $200-300. Yeah. So you can also go with something more simple here, and this is just something that maybe you keep in your vehicle or something like that, just as an emergency type situation. I have the Sawyer there on the left. It's really nice. We used it for a backpacking trip. Brian, you and I were on a backpacking trip, and
works very well.
It works very well.
And they've been around a long time. And they should last if a lifetime, actually, if it doesn't break, if you take care of it. But the filter component, as long as it doesn't break down, will last a lifetime.
Yeah.
But it's important to note that the Sawyer itself is a filter. It's not a purifier, meaning it doesn't get rid of viruses. It doesn't get rid of some of the heavy metals and some of the chemicals as well.
Right.
But if you have a fast-flowing stream that's pretty clean, your main worry there is Giardia from beavers, because beavers are pretty nasty. And that's what most people get really sick from if they drink creek water, for example. And it will definitely filter that. It will get most things. Like in the Southeast, for example, fast running water will get most things. It's kind of the still water that's just kind of sitting, especially if there's any animals like cattle and stuff next to it.
Yeah.
Where it gets more sketchy. You have to worry more about viruses and those type of bugs.
So for a Sawyer quick draw like that, you're looking at $60-70, I think it is.
Oh, they're cheap. Actually, it's around. So without the bladder, because the bladder, that's a little bit of an extra expense. But I would recommend getting the bladder, like it's pictured.
It's very helpful. Yeah.
It's very helpful, to fill it up. But you could just hook the plain Sawyer up to a smart water bottle, that 28 millimeter connection.
Yeah.
But the Sawyer squeeze itself is about $35-40. With the bladder, it's about $60. You can buy it together. But get it with the bladder. Everybody should have one of those.
Oh, yeah. I mean, just keep it in your car.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about here is really skills that are important. I think when persecution finally comes, and maybe some of us might be headed to other parts of the world to do, mission work, because when you go to the third world, for example, this brings to memory when we went down to the Amazon River, you would have on the boats, they would flush the boats, and the toilet would flush right out in the river.
That's just
and then it pulls water. The pumps pull water from the river up into the shower unit on top, which you shower from. And some of the locals
don't put the showers after the toilets.
Well, some of the locals down there are using that river water then to brush their teeth with and everything. And I had down there a Life Straw filter or Lifesaver filter, something like that, and it does put it through a really good rigorous filter. And I was able to drink some of the water from the river, and I didn't get sick from it.
I was going to mention Life Straw, so you've had some good experience with Life Straw.
I have. I think that one was a Lifesaver, so it was a little bit different.
So I have used the Life Straw. I went and used one time, and the issue is everybody's like, oh, just get a Life Straw. Just go get a Life Straw. So I used one time because the thought is that you can basically just put your mouth on one end and put to the other end stand in the contaminated water and you just suck really hard. Man, you really have to suck to get the water through there, though. It's not pleasant.
It's more of a bison pump thing than a.
I mean, you're like sitting there, and like my like cheeks were like sore by the end. I was like, my, how do you use this? So like the Sawyer, where you actually just fill the bag and then squeeze it through, is like much better.
And it'll go by gravity. I mean, you squeeze it'll go faster, but it goes pretty well just by gravity,
So
passively.
It's worth it to just get the bag.
And if you have a Sawyer and you come across, and all you have is maybe one of those sources that maybe it is near cattle and it's standing water and you're more worried about it, you can add in some of the chemicals like the potable aqua to kill off the viruses on top of that. So you can have that and just use it as you need it, and then primarily use something like a Sawyer.
James, that's your water filter up there in the top right, isn't it? The Catadine?
Yeah, it's a very good one. The classic microfilter from Catadine.
Yeah. Okay, here's another quote. Here before us is one of the fulfillments of prophecy, that before the day of the Lord should come, there should be earthquakes in diverse places, and that there should be wars and rumors of wars. This is Matthew 24 she's quoting. And that when these things shall take place, wherever you are, if you are at the top of the house, do not go down through the house, that you may get your luggage and carry it out. That time is right ahead of us. It is only a little way that you are to flee to the mountains just as fast as you can go. You will not have a chance to pack up your goods at all. So do not accumulate a great amount. It will not pay. The judgments of God are in our world.
Several of these quotes, I keep thinking about Lot and his wife. It's like, get out and do not look back.
And this goes, when I read this, I was like, wow, she's applying that part of Matthew 24 to our time. That means that there's going to come a deciding moment where we're told, get out, and you have to drop everything and go.
So the time is not far distant when, like the earthly disciples, we shall be forced to seek a refuge in desolate and solitary places. As the siege of Jerusalem by the Roman armies was the signal for flight to the Judean Christians, so the assumption of power on the part of our nation, the United States, in the decree enforcing the papal Sabbath will be a warning to us. Now, I want to be clear. There are some people today that look at the Blair Act in that time as kind of the first siege, okay, and say we've already been there. But I want to be cautious in that approach, because I do think the time for country living is now. But nevertheless, the decree enforcing the papal Sabbath was not actually assumed. Like it didn't actually go through all the way. So what I would see right here is the assumption of papal power. That's the warning to leave the large cities, preparatory to leaving the smaller ones for retired homes in secluded places among the mountains.
Well, the other thing that I want to highlight is that Ellen White does have a quote, and I don't have it here in this presentation, but she does have a quote where she says that hasty moves to the country are not advised. We're not just supposed to be like, oh no, and like we panic and we just rush and we buy something and like it wasn't well thought out and we didn't think about what we were doing. So there is some thought that has to go into it, but nevertheless, there does come a specific time, and I don't think that this, when she says, you don't even go back to your house to get your luggage, I don't think this is when the first Sunday law hits. Because if the first Sunday law hits, we just read other quotes where she says that we're going to be growing food in our fields because we can't buy or sell. Well, that's clearly after the first Sunday law.
Right.
And so my understanding is this quote about don't even go back and get your luggage. There's going to be angels or the Holy Spirit's going to be talking to you, and you're just going to realize
It's go time.
it's go time.
Yeah.
And you have to be attuned to the Holy Spirit. And if you're not going to get that warning, and you're not going to get out, and you're going to get destroyed.
Right. And I think as you go through some of the later material you have to show us, you're going to see that this is not something that you're just going to suddenly go and run out and suddenly be in the middle of doing this.
No,
you're going to need to get into this over time.
You need to be doing this
prayerfully
now.
Exactly. So we don't want anyone to think this is about just waiting till we see a Sunday law to actually get ready.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so talking about food preservation then, kind of jumping to the next topic. Have you guys seen shelves that look like this?
COVID.
Yeah.
That's the Frito shelf on a Friday afternoon.
Right before
Four
potluck,
haystacks.
Four
haystacks, yeah.
So actually, this is our local Walmart here, and I forget exactly when I took this photo, but we did see this happen during COVID, and you would go and look at the milk aisle. It would always happen during like storms, like blizzards. It's like all the bread and milk is gone instantly. When the shelves look like that, where are you going to buy food? Because it's not just no buy, no sell. It's also the fact that we're going to be facing extreme natural disasters and famine. Because there's that quote by Ellen White where she says, in India, China, and Russia, and the cities of America, thousands of men and women were dying of starvation. Thousands of men and women in the United States dying of starvation.
Yeah.
So it's not just that you can't buy it. It's also that it's not there.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yep.
And so when that happens, if you're going to all the other major stores out there, Costco, Walmart, Target, Publix, whatever it is in your local area,
Trader Joe's.
Sometimes if you go to other stores, like there's this one that's close to us, which is Janta Farmers Market. And this is kind of like a Middle Eastern or Eastern, like Indian style market. And these are the pictures of, so if I go back, if these pictures right here are during COVID, and this is what it looked like during COVID, this is what they looked, these are pictures I actually took inside Janta Farmers Market in the middle of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
These are when I took these pictures are dated from 2020.
Oh,
Okay.
wow.
And so look at how full those shelves are, filled with rice, beans, lentils, all kinds of different things. They were not running short.
Right.
And so really a lot of times it depends, like, are you thinking about a place that like most people, because there's a lot of panic buying that goes on.
Well, just think about the tendency to buy bread and milk.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that's going to perish pretty quickly.
Right.
I ran into one individual who was wise enough in the midst of the toilet paper crisis to go check the camping aisle because they have a camping TP. And so while the main shelf was sold out, nobody had thought to go check the camping TP section, like for the RV section, and they had it there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Of course.
Different texture, but
Yeah.
right,
Different
'cause it
texture.
breaks
Now
down
the real
easier.
outlier was in the bidets.
Yeah. Right.
There you go.
That's true.
Yeah.
And so you can get food and store it. And, I went and got some of these totes that you can get off of Uline, which they have these food safe storage totes, because not all buckets are food safe. You want to make sure you're getting something that's food safe, that's clean. And you can get there and store stuff. And you would think like, well, Alex is a full-on prepper. Just look, he's got totes full of food. Do you see all those oats there in the center? We used every single one of those. We used this entire thing. We were like eating a ton of oats. We were making all kinds of stuff. And all the beans were gone. We've used almost all the wheat. And so we do cycle through this. It's not like we're just trying to keep like a giant store on hand. We're trying to basically use this and just have this be part of the rotation, essentially.
Yeah.
And then it's really nice because you don't have to be like, oh, we're out of oats again. It's like, nah, we're not. We got plenty. And you can also get a bulk discount. So the Village Market, which is at Southern Adventist University, you can go in there and buy a giant 50-pound bag of oats. It's a massive bag of oats. And it's a lot cheaper than buying it, buying rolled oats in the tube like you typically do. If you're going to have things like that, you need a high-speed grain mill. You can get a hand crank grain mill, so you're just going to spend a whole lot of time cranking. But I have a Magic Mill 3, and you fill the top with wheat, and in about 5 minutes, you'll have 10, 14 cups of flour out the bottom.
Wow.
And it's very healthy to eat whole wheat like that. It doesn't get any more whole wheat than that.
yeah, that's great actually.
Yeah. So, and it makes some of the best tasting bread. And, the bread tastes so much fuller and better than the bread that you can buy at the store. I go to Walmart now. They don't have bread as good as I can make it. They really don't.
No, not at Walmart. No, this is
Or Publix or even Trader Joe's.
in
Oh,
trade.
man.
Well, they do carry Ezekiel. They have Ezekiel bread.
They
at
do.
Trader
Ezekiel,
Joe's,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
Ezekiel bread is a very good bread.
The other thing that you can do is you can get bulk soybeans out there, and you have a ridiculous amount of protein per cup of soybeans, and they store quite well. I have the I2V soy milk machine. You can make batch after batch after batch of soy milk. James, you had one of these.
Yeah.
And you used it so much you burned the motor out of it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I don't think it's brushless for the motor.
Yeah,
But
it's a
it
brushed
is
motor.
it is the easiest one out there. The biggest thing that I've run into with soy milk machines is the cleaning process. So after you do it, the ones that have like some kind of device up in it that you have to clean, it's a nightmare.
This is, in my opinion, annoying to clean.
Yeah, but it's still the easiest one out there. So it's still my favorite of all of them.
Yeah. And then if you don't have a tofu press to press your tofu so that you can change the texture and so that you can also make tofu, I went and bought one for $10 off of Amazon. Best thing I ever did. These are amazing. Anybody who doesn't have a tofu press should go and buy a tofu press.
Yeah, they're very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice.
I think too, what's going to happen is that we're going to be tested in our appetites.
Yeah.
at this time. So
Right.
these are ways to achieve a lot of the things that we're sort of used to, but part of it's going to be also being able to give up and substitute for things that we don't usually have.
Yes.
So as much as we're looking into the ways of how to have the luxuries that we kind of have, it's also going to be a thing of simplifying our diets too,
Very
to some
much so.
degree,
Very much
and not
so.
looking for all the rich things that we make amazing vegan food for potlucks.
Yeah.
But I mean, we're not always going to be able to eat like that as
No.
well. And we have to be able to, the Spirit of Prophecy talks about, simpler diets, simpler flavors, simpler things. And so
Right.
that will go along with country living.
Right.
Yep.
The other thing for food preservation is, are you canning? Do you know how to can? And what was amazing is that all the canning jars were like evaporated during COVID, but then a few months later, you had them all going on sale because all the stores bought a bunch of extra. And then you would go in Walmart and you would see literally pallets of them at the entrance, and they'd be on sale. And so you could get them for a lot cheaper price. And you can also get those lids that last forever. Those are the Harvest Guard lids, where basically you don't have to constantly be buying new lids for them. Now, a lot of people say, well, you can just have a deep freezer. Well, the problem with deep freezers, they're very good. I have a deep freezer, but at the same time, they use a lot of power, actually. And so if you are going to have solar for this, you can power them off of solar, but you better be sizing your solar system or whatever electricity system big enough, because otherwise it's all going to go bad. That's the downside of freezing stuff.
Yeah.
Have you guys ever seen this before?
No.
This is called a Midi-Cool clay refrigerator. Okay. They produce these in India. This is much more common in India than it is in the United States, which is why the price you see there, it's not in dollars.
Yeah, terracotta clay.
Yeah, it's made of terracotta clay, and you fill the top of it with water, and the water, since it's terracotta, goes through the terracotta. Okay, and it becomes very moist, damp, and it goes all the way to the bottom. Well, what happens when the entire surface of this thing is damp? Well, it has evaporative cooling. And so the evaporative cooling keeps a temperature differential inside where you can keep fresh fruit and veg and it'll be like 20 degrees colder than the outside.
Wow, yeah.
And it uses zero electricity. It just uses water. That's it.
Just curious. Do you know what the price conversion is for?
I don't honestly know.
Okay. I was just curious. Yeah.
I just thought I didn't
It's
buy
pretty
one.
cool.
I didn't buy one. I just thought it was cool.
It might appear as a bubble on the edit.
Yeah, it might.
There
Yeah,
you
it
go.
might.
So-
yeah, we'll figure that out.
8,000 Indian rupees, assuming that's rupees, is $84 United States.
Oh,
wow.
not at all.
Yeah.
Okay, too bad, actually. I want you to leave a comment below if you know what fruit this is that I am dehydrating. Okay, nobody give it away. I just want to see what the comments have to say about what fruit it is that I'm dehydrating right there. We'll just leave it at that. You just leave it in there for 8 to 12 hours and it'll dry it out, and then it's quite usable. The other thing that you can get is a Harvest Right freeze dryer. I wouldn't normally recommend these because they're incredibly expensive. For the model that is here, you're looking at probably $4,000 for it. And then it uses an insane amount of electricity. But if you do it correctly, you can have food that lasts for 25 or 30 years. And it really doesn't go bad. It actually is properly the only way to preserve all types of food long-term that really can't go
I
bad.
think 25, 30 years is a bit of an outlier for our purposes.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this one, I did not buy it for $4,000. I bought it for a few $100s, and it was broken, and I got out my solder machine, and I was out there soldering on it and buying replacement servos for it and everything else, and I managed to fix it. And so my case is kind of unique. I wouldn't normally recommend one of these because I really think it's just a giant amount of money. I just bought it because I thought it would be good for some backpacking meals, because you can get these backpacking meals right here. And I didn't like the taste of any of them, and so I was like,
that looks like it'd be good.
yeah,
It's
you'd
okay.
think.
You'd
You'd think.
Yeah.
Let's freeze dry.
You'd think.
I've
yeah.
never understood the freeze-dried ice cream bars. That they
No, those are just no.
have. Crunchy.
Yeah.
Crunchy ice cream.
Defeats the point.
Yeah.
Here's another quote. When the church is awakened, decided changes will be made, men and women will be converted, and so filled will they be by the Spirit of God that they will pass from country to country, from city to city, proclaiming the message of truth. How do you think that's going to happen?
See, this goes back to, I think, individual preparation for, I was just coming to mind here a moment ago. I was thinking about somebody, who's maybe on a limited income in the city and doesn't have like property and whatnot, but just doing the best that they can. Imagine what if you're like preparing your vehicle, like say you have a van or something like that, and you're like, God, I want to be prepared to go forth and give the loud cry. I mean, you could theoretically see somebody here with nothing taking their vehicle and being like going, city to city and giving the message.
You know what I also think of, though? There's a lot of uncertainty now. Like you think about gas prices; they're on the rise, right? This whole Iran war, the whole conflict. I don't think that the final message is going to be dependent upon necessarily public means of transportation. Now, I'm sure those will be utilized, but at the same time, what's the story in the Bible where he was preaching and then he was taken away in the Spirit?
Was that Philip?
Philip, yeah,
Philip the evangelist,
yeah. And so he was, for all practical purposes, he was basically teleported from one spot to another, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Okay. Ellen White also says, like, the closing of this world's history is not going to be manifested with any less power than at its...
Actually, 10 times more is actually the quote
Right.
she has.
So
10
it's
times
like...
more the power, yeah.
Okay, so for those of you watching, forget about what I said about the minivan.
yeah, it's just going to be...
God's got better plans.
better mode of transportation.
But I think, to look at this quote and say, well, how does this happen? This is what I would see this as the latter rain.
Yes.
And so the latter rain is going to come because the sins are being blotted out among the living.
Right.
And if the sins are being blotted among the living, it means the judgment is passed to the living, which means the Sunday law has already passed.
Yes. Yeah. But it's not a universal close of probation.
No.
at this point.
Individuals are coming up in probation. They're being filled with the Holy Spirit, and they're being sealed in this time. So this is after the Sunday law.
Yep. Heat doesn't really kill people. What really kills people is cold, actually. And so when we think about going through winter, what does the Matthew 24 say? It says, pray that your flight be not...
In the winter.
In the winter, yeah.
Or on the Sabbath day.
And so when we think about winter, we have to think about heat sources. And this is going to be important, especially during no buy, no sell. How are you going to survive? Are you going to cave and go take the mark of the beast for fear of having a cold house?
Yeah.
And so there's several different types of heat sources out there. You could have kerosene. I have a kerosene heater that you could put kerosene in, but the problem is it stinks. Even if you get the clean kerosene, it really stinks when it burns. It's good. It'll provide heat. Kerosene is expensive these days because not as many people are using it anymore. And the other thing is it just really smells bad. But it is a heat source that you don't have to have electricity for. So there's that.
But it's a temporary resource, I think, is the key thing. It's finite.
Yep. Here's a little propane heater that we have, and man, we love this thing.
Yes.
These are so nice.
Yep.
James, you have one of these too.
Yep. It's great. It's cheap. In the peak of winter, especially when electricity prices are going through the roof, having LP gas as a backup option is it's really good.
Yeah.
And, you think about it too, if your power was to go out, you're not as reliant upon the grid using something like that.
Yeah. And these work without electricity. Now, some of them will have where you can plug a fan in and it'll have a fan that blows the heat into the room. Mine has that, but I never plug it in. I use it without electricity exclusively. And it still heats the house just fine. And it'll get it hot in there too. And I have a carbon monoxide detector, and I keep it out in my main living space, which has the kitchen and the living room and everything. Never had any issues with it. Never had any kind of carbon monoxide or anything like that.
They work well. The former firefighter in me makes me a little nervous around these things. But you get the key points on the carbon monoxide, and you have to be smart as well as what's around it, where you're putting it in your house and moving everything that could get close to it that could be flammable far away.
Well, okay, so a certain little kid of mine took his little plastic hammer and chucked it down the center of the thing, and it was on, and I come out, and there's fire. Not where it's supposed to be. And I was like, oh no. And so I went and filled up a glass of water and dumped it on it, and I was able to put it out.
Right.
So you have an open fire, things are going to burn.
Yes, right.
And so when you use an open fire like this, there are risks.
Yep.
Just have to be mindful of that.
Yep, exactly.
Here, the other option is wood heat.
My favorite, actually.
Oh yeah. And there's a lot of different types of wood stoves out there. My personal favorite that I grew up with is actually a Vermont Castings wood stove. They have a catalytic converter in them. You flip that, and man, it just cranks the heat out. Now let's get into electricity. So electricity is kind of a big topic because there's a lot of different ways to generate electricity, and everything seems to use it. There's different solar options out there. Blue Yeti actually has a lot of plug-and-play solar options. James, I think you'd researched a lot of this in the past. What were your thoughts about the research here on this?
Yeah, I mean, I like Blue Yeti. There's a couple of different competitors that they have out there, but the reason why I chose Blue Yeti is because their batteries are supposed to last a lot longer the way that they're designed. So, yeah, I mean, and they're easy to set up. I mean, you just lay it out, and they're very portable. You can take it, you can plug multiple of them together and put them in series.
Mm-hmm.
So that tends to be really nice. It's great for something that's mobile, and if you're going to a place where they don't allow generators, like gas generators, which sometimes we go to, it's a good alternative.
So you basically just take that solar panel and just plug it straight into this unit, and boom, you've got power, basically.
Yeah, and it tends to last pretty decently. So this one right here, it's got 1,000 watts or 768 watt hours. So depending on how much your device draws, it's obviously going to last longer or shorter. But for basic lights and whatnot, it does a really good job.
Mm-hmm. These are well rated too. These are pretty good rated.
We know that there's this idea that when we are in the end times, we're not going to be sitting in one space. And so it's like you can put all this time, effort, and energy into your garden and building this off-grid empire, but what's it really going to do for you at the end? I think about what Ellen White says about Elijah. She says, again, God sees that a worker needs to be more closely associated with him, and to bring this about, he separates him from friends and acquaintances. When he was preparing Elijah for translation, he moved him from place to place that he might not settle down at ease and thus fail of obtaining spiritual power.
Mm-hmm.
And it was God's design that Elijah's influence should be a power to help many souls to gain a wider, more helpful experience.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's not about just parking in an Adventist ghetto and just chilling in the culture. It's actually serving and growing. And Elijah's a type for us.
Exactly.
For those that are looking for the time translation.
Yep, exactly.
Right. Yep. So the other question is, do you have tools? Now, obviously, DeWalt is an option, but you could also go with Milwaukee or something that's reputable that is going to last. But, if you buy one type of tool, then you can use the batteries amongst all of them. And it's really nice being able, if you're working on garden beds and you're working on bee boxes and you're working on a greenhouse and you're doing all this stuff, you're going to need some tools. Do yourself a favor and just get some cordless tools like this that it's just going to make your life way easier. I also think having a vehicle stocked with appropriate items like this right here is a good option. Basic tools to help you if you have any kind of emergency. I kept a tote like this in my truck. I can't tell you how many times I've used it.
An atlas.
An atlas.
An actual paper map.
An actual paper map.
Because
what is that?
you might not be able to rely on cell tower with your phone
GPS,
or something to actually have an actual map.
Yep. And so, just having some basic stuff in your truck. I can't tell you how many times I've run across people that they've got their car in the ditch or they need something. And I'm always the guy that's like, hey, we got to go stop. We got to go help those people. We got to pull them out.
Yeah.
It's like, when you do things like that and you're helping other people, you're going to actually have a lot of people that are more receptive and
what a witnessing opportunity.
Yeah, it'll be a blessing to them.
Yeah.
Be a good Samaritan.
Yeah. Okay, final quote. The time is coming when we cannot sell at any price. The decree will soon go forth prohibiting men to buy or sell of any man save him that hath the mark of the beast. In the last great conflict of the controversy with Satan, those who are loyal to God will see some earthly support cut off. Every earthly support cut off.
Good job, James.
Because they refuse to break his law in obedience to earthly powers, they will be forbidden to buy or sell.
Yeah. How is that going to be enforced?
CBDs.
Crypto,
CBDCs,
blockchain, right?
Yeah.
I
think so.
So, I mean,
Social credit score.
there's a certain amount of our people, and in the world too, that are really putting into gold and silver.
Yeah.
Because of dealing with, fiat's going to fail and all these things. But I mean, in the end, even those things are going to be tokenized on a blockchain. It's
they're ultimately going to be thrown to the moles and to the bats.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because it's not going to be about what you amass of your wealth in any form. It's going to have to be by faith and doing what God has asked you to do.
So, where do we ultimately go from here? Where do we ultimately land this conversation? And I think it really comes down to, is everything that I've listed here necessary? No. The only thing that's necessary is an enduring relationship with Jesus Christ.
Amen.
But we do have counsel to not just be asleep and just say, oh, it's fine. Everything's going to go on as it has.
Mm-hmm.
We do know that it is going to get very bad. And we do know that we do have counsel to get out in the country. What are those people going to feel like who haven't left the suburbs and see a Sunday law passed and see persecution and a no buy, no sell, and they're not out in the country?
Yeah.
They're going to wish with everything that they had that they were further out.
Yeah.
And I think that those of us who can afford country property.
Or what about converts?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Who are in the city, who are like, okay, I believe you.
Where am I going to go now?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I think that that's where this comes in, is not all of this is like a selfish, like, ooh, I need to save myself. But if you have a farm or a small piece of property that you have a garden, you have maybe a greenhouse, you have some of this stuff, there's going to come a time when people do need to leave that haven't had that opportunity. And maybe they don't have the financial means, they don't have the ability to prepare, but you could be a shelter for them.
Mm-hmm.
Ellen White says that in the end, we're going to be banding together in little companies.
Yep.
And I think that that is true. And I think that we need to have that in our mind going forward, so that we can be a light to others. And when we're banding together in companies, man, that's what heaven's going to be like, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's on this earth at this time that we're fashioned to be fitted together
Right.
here
Mhm.
to be ready for heaven.
I was actually reading from some of the news headlines about Adventists persecuted in the 19th century, and it describes in the newspaper, like, 6 or 7 or however many different number of Adventists who were arrested from a colony.
Yeah.
So there were times where Adventists had kind of, colonized.
You
a
mean
little
kind of
bit.
like the apostles of old when they sold all that they had and worked together?
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
just a little bit.
Yeah.
So perhaps that's something that needs to be kind of explored in the future is how we all work together rather than in our own little isolated spheres,
Yeah.
Like
Common
in,
society.
like in silos.
Yeah.
It's training yourself to think about others first.
Yeah.
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 Because if you just live in those little silos, kind of isolated, you're just constantly thinking about yourself. Like, what do I need? What does my immediate family need? And those things are important.
Right,
We're supposed
right.
to be the priests of our homes and manage our families well. But heaven's, I think a little glimpse would be like that type of colony or whatever you want to call it, where you are taking care of each other.
And
Right.
people have
Banding
different
together.
roles together.
Right.
In the
Exactly.
same, in
Their
the same
strengths,
body.
Yeah.
All with the same head, and you will run the right way.
Exactly.
Well, and nothing has been more apparent than, James and I working together, because I am more of the DIY kind of guy. I'd love to go out there and get my tools out and work on stuff.
we couldn't tell with this presentation.
You couldn't tell? Okay. But James, you probably, I think you enjoy it too, but not to the
Yeah.
degree that I do.
Yeah, I like to dig in the books and do the research stuff there, but
Yeah.
I mean,
So I like.
we all
has
get to
anyone-
work together.
Has anyone ever asked you, like, which one's heritage and which one's hope? Because I would say your heritage. You've got the Latin,
Yeah, that's true.
and you got the bouncy.
Well, there
let's
we
go.
go.
Do it. Deal.
Yeah,
Let's do it
let's get it
yourself.
done, yeah.
Let it get it done. And it's a great combo.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
Well, I think that one thing that would highlight this even better, that what this presentation is kind of lacking, is further discussion about the timeline, though, because the timeline is going to be crucial, because this is important to a point, but then we have to just drop everything when that angel or whoever says, or either the Holy Spirit or an angel comes and says, leave now.
Yep.
None of this is going to get taken with you during the great time of trouble.
No.
You are literally going to be walking away from everything.
Every earthly support will be cut off. It says.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
walking into the middle of the wilderness where ravens are going to be bringing you bread, and you're not going to have a ton. It's not going to be like you're just sitting down for a 5-course meal, right?
You have to be able to go without food sometimes.
Yeah,
Doesn't
and-
mean you're
yeah.
going to starve, but
And how many people have successfully had a fast for multiple days? How many people have done that? That's not common in today's society. It was actually more common previously, but it's not common in today's society.
no, not today. No.
So I think these are topics we have to think about, and the timeline is important. So again, if our audience is interested in kind of an end times event discussion, I think drop a comment below, because we'd love to hear that. If this video was a blessing to you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to this YouTube channel so you can stay up to date, because we have a lot of exciting videos coming soon. Thanks for joining us. God bless.